Hello, World Singers. My name is Brooke.
And I'm Tyler.
And this is
Cosmere Conversations.
We are back, ding ding, round 2, to argue about harmony or discord.
Yes, the more episodes we have, the more discordant they become. Not unlike books in the Second Era. I feel like we witnessed, or at least, better came to understand the complexities of harmony. And then obviously in The Lost Metal, we get introduced to this real, tangible thing of discord.
Maybe not tangible, but at least visible sometimes.
Visible, yes. And the dark shadow, as it is described behind or reflected by harmony at times, is an indicator of what we have been discussing long before The Lost Metal came out. All through our Era 2 rereads and looking at the story of Wax and Wayne, it is kept with an undertone of what is happening with Harmony, the character that we know and love from Era 1 as Sazed, and has something bad happen to Harmony. And so this episode is going to be all about harmony and discord. We're going to update our discordant fight from a few episodes back in regards to what harmony truly is. And I hope you all will let us know what you think. Where do you stand with harmony as an individual, as a shard, as one of these entities that we are both following through the Cosmere, but also don't understand fully in the Cosmere?
Yeah, we have gotten some really great messages from listeners over the last few weeks, some of them about this topic and some of them more generally. We get tons of great theories and thoughts from you guys, so please do keep reaching out on Facebook or Reddit, or you can send us a good old-fashioned email.
Yes, we do get regular emails often.
Obviously, our patrons can always contact us on Patreon. However, the first one I've got is not directly pertaining to harmony, but it's very interesting. This goes back to our State of the Sanderson episode where we were talking about Dan Wells writing in the Cosmere and that announcement that we got in the State of the Sanderson. Connor messaged us to say, quote, "I have some insights directly from the mouth of Dan. I got to talk to him a bit at the convention in November, and I asked what he would most like to work on in the Cosmere. He said he actually couldn't answer that because he gets to work on it and it's top secret," which I thought was interesting, but he did tell me a couple of other works that he gets to write. They kind of surprised me as I was on your thought process of him probably not touching Rashar or Scadrial, but he mentioned 2 Rasharan character novellas he'll get to help write. One I remember for sure was Yasna, and the other I'm about 80% confident he said was Lopen, but that could be wrong. End quote. Wow.
Connor, just
huge
bringing in the tea,
yes.
Dropping off some knowledge as if we are just a gossip central. I love it.
Doing the good work. Thank you, Connor, for that hot insight.
And if we are to believe this WOD, Word of Dan, that would be a huge revelation to me, because we had speculated that this would be maybe off in a different part of the Cosmere, having nothing to do with the core shard planets.
Yeah. I am surprised. I'm surprised that he would be trusted with writing a Yasna novella.
Now, here is my speculation based on what Connor has told us, which of course is transmitted from Dan, not directly from Brandon.
It's a telephone situation.
So we're not going to put too much emphasis on this, but I think that what we could maybe see is Brandon has very detailed outlines for a Lopen and a Yasna story in the Stormlight Archive, and like with Jancy Patterson's first introduction to the Skyward universe, maybe like a joint effort on those novellas marks the entry point for Dan to take over something completely on their own.
Well, I think that's always going to be the case in these circumstances where the guest author is not going to be like completely making up their own thing living in the Cosmere. It's going to be from a Brandon outline. Brandon is going to be heavily involved and like editing, and they'll have meetings and talk about like where the story should go, et cetera, et cetera.
I think that the difference would be a story generated by Brandon and conceived by Brandon versus something more unique within the Cosmere, which is kind of where I was guessing Dan Wells would slot in. He has more of a background in writing horror and thriller series, and so I thought that he would maybe be taking over one of those non-core shard worlds, and I think that this would just be a first introduction, and like if it goes well, then he would be given more and more freedom within the Cosmere to like do his own type of thing.
I don't see that. I mean, I think that Brandon will choose stories that are best suited for the guest author. And so if he already has a story idea that's more in a like horror or thriller vein, then obviously that would be a great option to give Dan. I don't see Brandon ever just being like, yeah, write whatever you want on a Cosmere world. Maybe that will happen, but I don't see it.
I am merely following the exact same script that we saw with Jancy Patterson over in the Skyward universe.
Well, everything in those books was outlined by Brandon.
That's what I'm saying. But future works by Jancy Patterson, it's already been announced, are going to be more her creations. She's going to be more of the main driver of the stories going forward, and Brandon will serve in a editing role, whereas I think the ones that she did were more Brandon focused and Brandon central.
I hadn't heard that she was like just taking over the stories.
I do believe
news to me.
Yeah, that was more of a, there's going to be Jancy Patterson forward or focus stories that are going to come more from her in that world. So I'm just applying that to the situation with Dan Wells and the little bit of information that we got from Connor. Obviously, this is all hot gossip and not in any way confirmed by Brandon himself or Dragonsteel publicly. So we will maybe put a pin in that and move on to some listener feedback that is going to introduce us to the Harmony Discord arrangement that we have found ourselves in.
Our next message here comes from Irving. And Irving had some interesting feedback from the last time that you and I discussed this on the podcast. I would like to first point out that he said he sides more with me. So there's a point in my corner. And then he went on to say, quote, I think that the balance in Harmony is a spectrum and that the individual parts wax and wane, pardon the pun, so that you get Harmony to Discord to Harmony and all of the stops in between, end quote. I thought that was an interesting idea of like the spectrum. And I could see that as well. Harmony, like Irving says, waxing and waning in between the two extremes, sometimes being more Discord, sometimes being more Harmony, and then, you know, everywhere in between those poles.
I really love this interpretation because it gives the full range of possibility, and it is somewhat related to Taravangian's curse, inverse relationship with that Night Watcher blessing and curse. I think that for Harmony to exist on a spectrum is also reminiscent of other Greek and Roman god stories from that pantheon. Janus, for example, exists simultaneously in kind of two different mindsets. And I like that for Harmony, that they are both Harmony and Discord at the same time. What Irving is saying is that they kind of flow back and forth as if the waves in the ocean. But I also imagine that there could have been inspiration taken from kind of a individual, Sazed in this case, who is multiple things simultaneously. And I just think that there's a lot of different avenues Brandon could go down for like what this means for Sazed as the vessel in comparison to the shards and the shardic intent that he is holding and wielding.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing to highlight, that he is multiple things at once.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like that is sort of the thing that we need to remember as we have this discussion. It may not be a matter of like, is he harmony? Is he discord? Black and white, but more of a like, well, he's kind of both all the time.
And I think Irving would say, on a different day, he could be an entirely different thing as he's waxing, waning through a cycle, not unlike humans do with their hormones and their biology of moving through a monthly cycle, flowing back and forth between versions of yourself. Maybe during a certain period of the month, you are more outgoing and energetic. Maybe when the sun comes out.
Or, like point in the year, seasons, exactly. That type of theory.
And harmony might fall within that spectrum of existence, is that, as things flow and change, you could get a different harmony on a different moment.
Yeah. Next is from a listener named Ed. And he wrote in and said, quote, "Since harmony can become discord, God metals can change under conditions, intention matters so much, and there's a word of Brandon that there could have been different shards. The shards must still be capable of change under the right conditions and intentions. For instance, autonomy might be able to become something like independence, empowerment, or maybe something of a higher vibration like self-actualization or even transcendence. In fact, that might be the ultimate direction in the Cosmere is heading." End quote. Love this call. I love bringing this back to the original shattering of Adonalsium and the fact that it could have been split into different intents, and the idea that the shards can change. We've already seen the fact that these shards are somewhat subjective, with Odium trying to go by passion. And there is some like wiggle room for interpretation within the shard. And I think that also depends on the vessel holding the shard.
Of course. And that's really what applies to our situation with harmony and discord, is that the answer, is it harmony and discord, is maybe dependent entirely on Sazed himself. And if Sazed was a different person entirely, it would have definitely become discord.
Right.
But because he is who he is and who he was, it exists in this like quasi state or this full spectrum. But I agree that any of the shards have to still be capable of change because there's an interaction happening between the shard and the vessel, that a new vessel can radically alter the direction of a shardic intent. I think Reza was trying to take Odium in a certain direction of more passion.
Well, and we saw him fail basically.
Exactly.
So I don't know if we can use that as like proof.
I'm not saying that it was a successful, but it was, I guess, when you're dealing with these God-powered entities, I'm almost like, if they tried it, they had to know it was possible or they wouldn't have wasted energy trying it, Well,
I don't think they knew. Like, I don't think necessarily they knew that would be the case. I certainly think that shards are able to be influenced by their vessels, but I think the only example that we have right now is that the shard will win in the end.
Yes, that the overall impact of like all that spiritual energy and investiture and the driving almost like force behind its intent is stronger than any vessel. But I think we might also have some examples of the heralds in different people being able to withstand different trials and torment, where the heralds, cracked at different times and Taln obviously never broke. Maybe the shards too are similar, where Reza might have just been, particularly weak to the power of Odium, and Ati and Laris might have been better suited for a different, like they might have all come to their power either with certain strengths to back that up or with certain weaknesses that maybe exposed something that other shards are not exposed to. Odium and Reza might have had a particular relationship.
Well, we know that the vessel has to be at least a little bit in alignment with the intent of the shard. We know that, I think it's Hoyd in one of the letters says that Reza is particularly aligned with Odium in that he was a hateful man, I guess. I forget what the exact quote is, but there's a quote bringing them very closely together.
And I think that was in opposition or to counter Ati, who was not a evil or ruinous person,
right,
but was taken up by the shard ruin, or he took up the shard ruin, and that impacted him. And so it's like the double combination can have greater impacts, but we saw that fail. Like that letter was written at a time when Reza Odium had not yet failed.
Yeah.
And we know that eventually Reza Odium will fail.
But then you also have to ask, is this another Lord Ruler situation where really Reza was the best person to take up Odium? Odium may have wreaked even more havoc over those years in somebody else's hands. Like maybe because Reza was so aligned with the intent, he was kind of the only one strong enough to keep Odium, I hesitate to say in line, but as much in line as he was, I guess.
There certainly might have been choices that Reza made as the vessel of Odium that a different vessel would have made a different decision. And it seems like Reza's choices ended with failure and ended with like imprisonment upon Rashar.
Like, what if Reza knew that if he went to the Rasharan system, like Odium would get trapped. And so he sort of like puts himself in this confinement to protect the rest of the Cosmere from Odium.
Exactly. I think that's a deep question that we won't have any type of answer.
Of course.
In any type of like acceptable timeline. That's one of those deep, far off questions about like what was happening with the vessels themselves. And I want to ask here, where are we at on Secret Project spoilers? Are we allowing that on the podcast right now or holding back?
Great question. I think no spoilers.
Okay. For now, no spoilers on Secret Projects. That will change when we have the full access to Tress and the Emerald Sea. I think that there are some aspects of that story that might help us better understand what those original 16 plus 1 plus Mr. Hoyd individuals were doing at the beginning, at the shattering.
I'm curious to hear what you have to say about that, but that'll be in a different episode. Let's get into talking about Harmony specifically now that we've done our musing about the nature of shards and vessels in general. We get some really interesting descriptions of Harmony throughout this book that I would love to just read out so we can kind of get that picture of who Harmony is as he's described in The Lost Metal.
And these are updated to the descriptions we previously got. So this is all directly from The Lost Metal itself.
Yes. Quote, Harmony seemed as vast as the Cosmere, 2 sweeping wings, one white, one black, spinning together in the middle, the edges extending to infinity. End quote.
To me, this is one of the most interesting visualizations because it introduces wings. Wings are not a thing that I previously assigned to like any of the shards.
Yeah, I don't think any of them have shown themselves with wings.
We can speculate that maybe there is a dragon or two among the shards who would have dragon-esque wings.
Maybe. We don't know if these are dragons with wings.
There's
so many different kinds of dragons.
Yeah, that's very true.
And we know from Odium that shards can present themselves in whatever way they want to be seen by the person they're presenting themselves to. So I would assume that in this moment, Harmony chooses to present this way. Maybe there's always like a black-white
Vibe
together situation happening, but I would say like he probably chose the wing thing.
Interesting. Okay, I legitimately believe that there was a aspect of perhaps Harmony Sazed themselves that, you know, felt some connection to the winged, angelic in our world, the Christian symbology, you know, the Archangel Gabriel or something with like the big outstretched wings. And in this case, just like they keep going to all of infinity.
Yeah. We haven't seen any religions, even in all of Sazed's religions that I remember anyway, with winged figures.
Certainly not. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, maybe he got that from somewhere else. It seems like this is just sort of a visualization of his powers, right?
I agree. And as you said, it might be something that's a reflection of kind of like what Wax in this instance, I think, is expecting to see, or like how he wants to view God. And therefore Harmony is reflecting that back to like show him what he expects.
Yeah, I guess we also don't really know what the teachings of Pantheism are, if there is like a canon
this is what
visualization,
God looks like.
of like what Harmony looks like in that religion. So maybe that is something that Wax learned as part of his religion and is expecting to see, and therefore that's what he sees.
From my understanding and based on what we have seen previously in the books, I didn't have any visualization until this moment. And so it was really important to add that to me.
Yeah, this book has the most detailed descriptions. Yeah, previously it's just kind of been like, Sazed shows up. He is a terrace-looking man in robes.
Normally with some like depth of infinity. I looked into his eyes and like saw into the universe or something.
But a lot of it is also more about the environment that they're in and this sort of dreamlike environment that Wax is more focused on versus Harmony. This was cool.
Let's go to another one of these descriptions. Quote, always there, like a coin balanced on edge, a gulf on either side. End quote.
And that is when Sazed is talking about the fact that he feels like he exists in between life and death.
Yeah, he says this, quote, on the very cusp of death. Sometimes I think that's where I reside, end quote.
Yeah, really interesting.
This description, along with the very important mention in the Ars Arcanum of death, in this case, Marsh's physical description, spreading throughout the Cosmere and not only being an image of death on Scadrial, that there are more mentions of that image of death, someone with spikes into their eyes, is apparently spreading throughout the Cosmere as a vision of death.
Do we have that quote?
From the Ars Arcanum, yes, absolutely, we can get that. And I love the descriptions that we have here of this like balance, but also very strange position, because we know that Laris, preservation, had a particular emphasis on like welcoming those at death into the beyond, and that transition that we saw in Mistborn Secret History. I wonder if that's a remnant kind of that effort that preservation did for so long. It's a strange spot for Sazed to exist, is like, I sit on the edge of death and life.
That makes sense to me, actually. I mean, I think that Harmony does continue to do that specific job of like ushering souls into the beyond. Marsh says that sometimes he does it as well. But this makes sense to me because of the weird conversation about vessels that we've had in the past, and like, are they alive? Are they dead? When a vessel changes, the old vessel's body like falls out of the
ether,
spiritual realm or something. It like reappears. And so it's a very strange situation. And so it makes sense to me that Sazed would phrase it this way as like, well, I'm not really dead, but I'm not really alive either because I'm a vessel. And I'm like, thank you. This is exactly what we have been wondering. Like, thank you for speaking directly to that.
Now, just to bring in that quote from the Ars Arcanum in the Lost Metal. So this is Chris writing after she said that she had obtained an interview with Marsh. Quote, as a side note, it is curious how news of his nature is spreading to other worlds. Is this natural rumor mongering or something more supernatural? End quote.
Okay.
I've been speculating on this idea regarding, is this Harmony or is this Marsh that is pushing the ideas of himself, of death, into the rest of the Cosmere? And my first thought is this is an example of Harmony setting up something that we don't know. So like Death, Marsh, his agent, could be used throughout the Cosmere in the far future is what I think that's pointing to. And this concept that he's kind of like recognizing himself as a merchant of death is the wrong term, but this power that sits on the cusp of death and then being physically represented by Marsh, who is death, I think is very interesting, and it's maybe important down the road.
Yeah, I feel like we don't really have enough information about the Marsh situation to really start to speculate, but it is intriguing.
Can you remind us of another situation where Harmony is seen reflected as his mortal self, as his vessel, Sazed, but still a god being?
Yeah, I thought this was really insightful. Later in the book, Wax meets with Harmony again, and we have, quote, he looked to Harmony and saw something different this time. Not the vastness of the powers or even the figure of legend, but a man. Thrust into a war that none of them had been ready for, playing catch-up to learn powers that others had presumably spent millennia mastering. He's doing his best, Wax thought, and struggling to avoid being crushed by the opposing powers he holds. He needs help, and I'm all there is, end quote. I love that he brings in this point that Sazed is the youngest vessel. Well, I guess
other than
counting Taravangian, but that they know of. He is the youngest vessel, and this is such a great point that he is like scrambling to play catch up while everyone else has had such a long time to practice being a shard, and now Harmony is, you know, in the arena with the big boys, and he's like, I don't know how any of this works. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to use these powers. And he's the only one that has 2 powers. So that's like a whole other thing. You're not even, you know, just getting your PhD. You're like getting a double PhD, and you haven't even graduated from high school yet.
So Sazed has his work cut out for him. And we also know that this war of the gods, this war of the shards, is uniquely tied to their shattering of Ad Nauseam in the first place, which Sazed was not a part of. Not only are there millennia of experience in the powers themselves, but they also have access to the people they were before they were vessels and shards. They know about the personal life of the other individuals, where Sazed is coming into everything blind. He doesn't know who Ati and Laris were, but could presumably Reza knew Ati and Laris on a personal level, and that goes for all of the other shards as well.
Which gives you some extra context when you're dealing with each other. I don't want to say that this is a war of the gods. We've only really seen like 2 bad actors so far. For the most part, they seem to be, or at least tried to agree to stay away from each other, presumably like to avoid specifically a war of the gods.
Certainly it does feel like Stormlight 5 will be the coming out party. If things go terribly wrong on that planet, then the war of the gods could be kicked off in a way that we haven't seen yet.
Maybe, yeah.
And I think that we have in Harmony a potential wild card, a swing vote, a person who could be supremely helpful or could be supremely harmful. And that comes down to this duality of harmony and discord and our previous disagreement that we've had about the nature of harmony or discord. Because
you think that harmony doesn't exist and it's always been discord.
I do. I think that from what we saw in the Lost Metal, and I just want to clarify my point a little bit in this moment to say, I think that the imbalance of preservation and ruin was always favoring ruin. That to create humanity on Scadrial, some of preservation's power sapped into humanity, and therefore they are not in balance anymore. They have never been in balance. That set up all of Era 1, as we know. But I think now, even though they're held by a single individual, the imbalance is still present, and therefore we are merely waiting until discord fully comes out onto the scene and onto the center stage, where that power is being redirected right now by Sazed into a more harmonious situation. But he will eventually lose, and if he's going to eventually lose, then he's already lost.
That's not the way that time works, at least not for humans.
Right, but we're not humans.
You can't make that argument.
My only
You do believe that he has been harmony up until this point, and he is becoming discord, I think, is what you just said.
I think that the concept is that, yes, he, Sazed, is channeling discord, the two powers together, because they're imbalanced, into something he calls harmony, but that it is not harmony, that it is an imbalance and it is discord, but he is just calling it that as it's his variety.
You think this is an odium passion situation?
100%. That in the exact,
just a lie.
In the exact same way that maybe Race of Odium really wanted Odium, the power, to be passion. Maybe let's at least, I don't know that speculation, but let's say that Sazed probably does want the powers to be working in harmony. And he probably does want those positive aspects of harmony to be what is actually going on. But I don't necessarily agree that that's what's going on. I think it's just the name that he's trying to apply to it.
Okay. I think I just sort of take that one step further, and going back to, I think it was Irving's message about intent playing a role, the fact that Sazed's intent is to use these powers for harmony makes it harmony. And I think that there is a difference here versus Odium, because harmony and discord really are, as I said in our previous episode, two sides of the same coin. And it's just sort of a matter of perspective or intent, versus calling hatred passion is they are related. You could make an argument for them being related, but I don't think they are as close as harmony and discord are.
I would agree with that. I don't think that harmony and discord are that different because, of course, Brandon has so much music theory and music philosophy that intertwines many aspects of the Cosmere. And when two things are in harmony with one another, it doesn't take a lot of shifting around to make that harmony become discordant, or to take a beautiful harmony and make it sound not that great. I believe that the situation that we have is almost like an expert musician who has taken a guitar, whatever instrument you want to imagine, and they are playing it beautifully, but it is always going to be out of key. It's not going to be tuned appropriately, and therefore the music that it makes is always going to be discordant, regardless of how talented they are.
The music people are going to come for us now, because neither one of us are musicians. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think there's a difference between out of key and playing two discordant notes that are in key and just don't go together.
You're definitely correct from the music theory perspective, or what music is.
In terms of this analogy, you can still play discordant notes and make beautiful music out of it.
Oh, that's a very good point that I would immediately cede the ground to you. I think that's actually a better point, is that discordant music doesn't necessarily mean bad music, or it doesn't necessarily mean music I don't enjoy.
Yeah.
And that's kind of maybe different than what we were expecting.
And then this makes me think, like, maybe that's what Sazed is missing. Maybe he needs to embrace a little bit of the discord, and that would enable him to be less immobile and like indecisive. Because if you have that friction, that is where things happen. Because he is like trying to force them to be harmonious and passive, he becomes inactive.
Of course, the Lost Metal is also about this introduction of the shard autonomy into this situation that we're talking about that's like already difficult to understand just what two shards and two powers are doing. Then when you have the introduction of another vessel and another shard, what does that do? I have heard some speculation online about a eventual victory by Harmony where they defeat autonomy and like absorb that power as well, becoming the first three-pronged shard.
Well, that was our guess for potentially the Lost Metal, but that obviously did not happen.
Not in any way, shape, or form. It was more of just a psych out, a feint in many respects. You know, the war never really got on.
Not as exciting as we thought it might be.
We were filled with potential before the last book arrived, but I believe that the red haze of autonomy is not gone from Scadrial, and this is not the last that we will see of autonomy and Scadrial. I think that there is a part 2 in Era 3. That is a weird number combination, but you understand what I'm saying. Like, this fight with autonomy was not what Brandon wanted to do. As we have talked about many times, Era 2 was a side path that then developed into what it became. However, he always did imagine the 1980s spy thriller Scadrian story. And maybe that's really what or when autonomy and harmony will come to fruition and really duke it out in a more direct fashion. I think that there's a lot that we could take away from this first clash of autonomy and harmony. And I'm left with the thought process that Sazed might be playing everything close to their chest purposefully in order to generate maybe some discord. And again, back to what Irving's saying, a spectrum of existence where for the first 300 years, he was very harmonious, but also now maybe the next couple of years are going to be very discordant. And that could be something that the shard itself is playing out or wants to play out in the environment. And so, for example, setting up Thydakar, setting up Wax and Wane, setting up the development of technology of Fabrials on Scadrial could be an aspect of discord. That like, I was doing all of this on purpose. I was just pretending to be a harmony that didn't know what was happening or unable to solve the problems. But in reality, what I want is conflict. I want this discord in between the Scadrian people and the Southern Scadrians, between the Scadrians and the Autonomians.
That, if anything, that would be like the intent of the shard taking over. I don't think Sazed would ever say that, which is like maybe his downfall. And that would just be the intent of the shards like leaking into his actions. In terms of autonomy on Scadrial, one thing that I thought was really interesting is that Harmony's blindness is caused when autonomy's like red haze of influence is able to invest Harmony, which I thought was so interesting because I don't think I realized that shards can be invested or like corrupted just like regular investiture. And I'm just like, how did that happen? How does that work? What does that potentially mean for other shards or this potential shard war happening in the future? Like, do other shards know about this? Are they all just leaving little investiture bombs for each other that can invest each other? Does that affect their intent? Does it hang around? Like, Harmony says that eventually he will be able to see again and, like, the effects will wear off. But is there some kind of latent effect?
I think that what we've seen from autonomy throughout the Cosmere, specifically on First of the Sun with the island Pat-G, which we believe to be a avatar of autonomy in a similar way that Telsin was the Scadrian avatar, that maybe that's exactly what autonomy is trying to accomplish, is that I'm going to drop a little bit of investiture or invested physical material in this, an island or a person, whatever. I'm going to drop a little bit on another planet. And if you let that fester for long enough, eventually autonomy of the shard will have like an easy access point. I would imagine that First of the Sun and autonomy, though it's not their planet like Taldane is, they will have much easier access to that planet than any other shard. And so when we see...
But investing the planet is completely different from investing another shard.
I guess I don't necessarily know what you mean by that. That's like investing the shard.
That's literally all it says in the book. Harmony just says, the haze invested me. And that's my question. What does that mean?
After taking a look at the quote itself, Wax is asking about the red haze that he had viewed previously, and Harmony states that it's no longer there, but he didn't drive it off, that it has instead become part of the planet. And that's what you're talking about when you're saying it invested Harmony or invested the shard.
Yeah, specifically the quote is, it invested the planet, it invested me. So those are two different things, and it did both. It invested the planet, which I feel like we kind of understand what that means. We've seen investiture go into a physical object like that before. But the invested me is my question. Like, what does it mean for a different investiture to invest another shard?
I would see it as slightly different because of the specific situation that we have on Scadrial, where Ati and Laris created the planet Scadrial. Unlike Rashar and some of the other planets throughout the Cosmere that existed before and shards just arrived, Ati and Laris made the planet themselves. So there is no separation between Ati, Laris, Preservation, Ruin, and the planet.
Well, there is.
But there's not. I don't think that they are any different. Where there is a separation between Cultivation Honor / Odium and Rashar. Not to say that Odium can't invest themselves into the planet Rashar, but I think that that's what the quote leads us to, is that when Sazed is saying it invested the planet, it invested me, is that he is the planet.
But he is not the planet.
But he created the planet. His power created the planet.
Harmonium, yes, Harmonium is the physical manifestation of Harmony. That is him.
I think it's deeper when it comes to Scadrial, where we see Trellium can exist on Scadrial. That certainly did not create, or autonomy certainly did not create Scadrial, but their metal can exist there, because that's like something that happens on Scadrial. Superpowered investiture can manifest itself as a physical metal.
Yeah, and the planet is not a physical realm manifestation of a shard just because the shard created it. The shards create a lot of things. That doesn't mean that they are inexorably, capital C, connected to the shard.
Oh, I would disagree. I think that is what we're supposed to take away from this situation, or this quote, is that the planet and Sazed and the shard are all one thing. And that might be different from other situations throughout the Cosmere, because Scadrial is a manifestation of like Ati and Laris's will.
I disagree, but that's not what this podcast is about anyway.
Really what it's about is this concept of discord, and is Harmony one or the other, both, as we've talked about, existing on a spectrum. Let's go to the text to get some of the quotes specifically about discord. Quote, Harmony knows he's growing impotent, that discord is near, end quote.
Pretty clear. That is also clearly indicating that harmony is not discord now, but that he may become discord soon.
You're reading a lot into that quote that I don't quite see.
It says that discord is near, not that he is discord right now.
I understand that it's saying discord is near, but you're also imagining that there's like some physical difference in space for a shard. I think if discord is near, then discord is here. That there is no time and space for a shard. If Sazed is going to become discord, in my view, he is already discord.
We can't turn this into a podcast about the
space-time relativity. Yes.
That's not what we can do here. And you can't make arguments based on time not existing.
It is my speculation that for shards, time may be slightly different. But
yeah, I'm sure it is.
More importantly, the physical manifestation that we start to see of this discord being near in the dark double, the shadow person,
starts appearing. Quote, a figure, mostly transparent, stood beside him, a tall, bald man, Terrace, and another darker fellow stood behind him. Not in the skin tone sense or anything, like this other one was a shadow. It mimicked Harmony as he held out his hands to Wayne, end quote.
Perhaps the most interesting quote when it comes to what Harmony is, this concept of he himself mostly transparent, tall, bald, Terrace looking, but then this darker fellow, a shadow person, mimicking Harmony, so seemingly not in opposition to Harmony.
Right, because they are one and the same.
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, the presence of a double must remind us a little bit of Kelsier Thydekar, of Szeth, and the stapled back version of himself.
Oh.
It kind of just indicates something off about the situation. In my mind, is just like something's not quite right about what's going on here. In a perfect universe, I don't think that would exist. This shadow person.
Oh. I mean, I think we all have a shadow side, and so I think every shard also has a shadow side.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. You think that every shard has one of these doubles?
Yeah, I think that any of them can be used for negative, basically. And that, again, this sort of comes back to intent, but that they are all two-sided coins and we see this a little bit on Rashar, where the heralds are kind of getting twisted. We know that Honor started like having some issues towards the end of his life. And I'm thinking specifically of the Skybreakers, who, originally their job was to sort of keep the law to promote justice. And they've taken that in a really dark, intense direction of only obeying the letter of the law, not the spirit of the law. And so I think that Honor, in the same sort of way, could, under the best circumstances, maybe it's Honor, but taken the wrong way. Maybe it has a vessel that's trying to use it for evil, or in the wrong circumstance, it might turn to become
another
something dark. Yeah. And I am like not able to think right now of like what bad Honor would be, but
in our own world, I think that there are plenty of examples of Honor being taken to a dark extreme. There is, for example, Honor killings that have existed throughout many different cultures and societies, where it's like, you must die, I must kill you because honor against our family or the
honor
community
demands it.
Exactly. And that's the only thing we're really doing it for. Is just
and
honor.
Then, that becomes something like arrogance or something like that would be the other side of the honor coin.
That's a really interesting thought, that all of these shards may exist on a spectrum, and we are only seeing it in Sazed first because he's now the most extreme version holding two shards.
Exactly.
So his spectrum is bigger, and he has like more things that he is capable of and more ways that he can manifest himself, and his power as the holder of 2 shards, where a cultivation is going to be strictly limited in their spectrum to only cultivation-like things. It can be maybe a dark or a light cultivation thing, but they're still bound. And Sazed has a bigger field that he can exist in. I like that idea a lot, and it puts a new perspective on this dark passenger that Sazed has.
Let's keep going with some quotes. We also hear, I think this is from one of the Khandra, who says, quote, Harmony wasn't accompanied by his dark double, the shadowy version that sometimes appeared these days, a representation of his other self, end quote.
Now, of course, we have the rise of this dark double seemingly happening, more and more with just regular interactions. And that corresponds with an indecision or indecisiveness that Sazed feels more generally. Mm-hmm. And I'm left with this concept that we get from Marsh/Death of, quote, your enemy, Death said softly, has learned how to circumvent one of the most important limitations to hemalurgy. Her agents bear too many spikes. That should open them to Harmony's influence, but it doesn't. Either Harmony is too weak to exploit what they've done, or they found a way to use Trell's own metal to offset the weakness. End quote. Where I'm left is with that question. Is Harmony too weak to exploit what they've done? Or have they found a loophole or an offset to the particular weakness?
Yeah, I think they've found a loophole.
It may be more of the mindset that a discord, even if that's just a Harmony existing on the spectrum and like at this moment happens to be on the more discordant side of the spectrum, they may have let this type of thing happen. The original reason for our disagreement was around the creation of Lerasium and Atium from the explosion. Mm-hmm. And that original quote from one of the Khandra who said that as long as Harmony remains Harmony, there will be no separation of Harmonium. Harmonium will stay pure. And we saw Harmonium not remain pure, which leads me to believe that either that's a loophole, something's gone terribly wrong, or maybe a discord wants those aspects. A discord wants more division between Atium and Lerasium, doesn't want the pure Harmonium. When it comes to that division, do you think that there's more of a loophole that has been discovered, or that there is a desire of Harmony to increase the discord?
No, I think there's a loophole. We see that they create spikes made out of Trellium, and it would make sense that if the spikes are out of Trellium, obviously that would connect them to Trell, not connect them to Harmony.
And there's a repelling aspect that we see with Trellium.
Right, yeah.
It may be like the force that is keeping Harmony at bay. It's like what he should be able to do is like kind of use the spikes as direct beacons or direct tie-ins, but instead the Trellium spike is preventing that, a force field of sorts around the individual.
Yeah, it's sort of like the Renarin effect.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Odium can't see Renarin.
Yeah, it causes like a blind spot.
That's actually a really good pull, because Renarin is not Renarin just because he's a fun guy. He has Gliss and one of the corrupted Spren, and so too in this way of like a corrupted metal with Trellium on the planet. I think that all works out and sounds like a good explanation of what is happening. Wow, amazing conversations about Harmony and Discord. I feel like there's more. There's more.
So much to talk about. This could be like a 3-hour podcast of mostly us arguing.
We're going to continue to look at the Lost Metal. Over on Patreon, we have our very special book club going with Secret Project #1, Trust of the Emerald Sea.
It's great.
And so feel free to join us over there. As a little end of the podcast game, I have a fun little experiment for you. This is going to involve some visual cues, which I know is terrible for an audio medium like podcasting, but if you go check the show notes right now, should be a little link to what we are discussing as well over on Patreon, Twitter. There might be some polls that you can take place. So you can take the place of Brooke in this situation as we play the game. Is it Harmony or is it Discord?
That classic game show.
Everybody's favorite game show. Right after you spin the big wheel and you make your big bet, we have a couple of images that have been created with the assistance of the artificial intelligence machines.
Because Tyler is obsessed.
So obsessed. But what I have done is taken the description that we get from the Lost Metal,
the quotes,
when it comes to Harmony, thrown it into the AI machine, and I've gotten some images back in return. And I want you to select Harmony, Discord for each of the images, okay?
I have not seen these previously, so I'm seeing them for the first time. Here we go.
Now, just as a clarifier of the parameters that were used, we're basing most of these images off of this quote that we talked about earlier. Quote, Harmony seemed as vast as the Cosmere, 2 sweeping wings, one white, one black, spinning together in the middle, the edges extending to infinity. End quote. I told you that I was enraptured with this quote and this vision of a winged harmony. Mm-hmm. And so threw this into the AI machine. I want you to let me know. I will give a brief description for the audio-only listeners of the image, and then you tell me, is this more Harmony or is this more Discord?
Yeah, because this image you created with a description of Harmony, so I would just say Harmony. How did you choose images that are like supposed to be Harmony or supposed to be Discord?
Okay, so that's an excellent...
Or did you do something different?
That's an excellent question. These are all from the same basic prompts. There is no tilting of the description that I tried to do to like make one more discordant. These all come from the same prompts.
But you think they came out looking differently?
Correct. Okay. I think that
that's interesting.
Yeah, actually. The images are different enough where you can take the same prompt and you can get different images. I don't want to go into all of the different stuff that I did, but for a very basic description, I'm just going to say that everything was functionally from the same prompt, but we have different images, and some of them to me feel more harmonious and some feel more discordant.
Okay. So this first image, it is basically exactly what that quote sounds like. There's not a person involved. It's like literally just 2 wings that are sort of in like a yin-yang configuration. There's like a little bright light in the middle, and then they have some sparkly ether type things along the outside of the circle, their edges. I would say that this is Harmony.
Wonderful. I love that. First image, Harmony. Second image, here we go.
Okay, this one, there is a person. It's more like an angel type
and I want to be clear, all of the other ones will kind of have more of a person at the center. So they'll follow more of this mold than the last one, which was more interpretive. The AI was just like, I don't know, this?
Yeah, so this one is definitely more of an angel. It's got sort of a halo happening around the head. The wings are the same color. Mm-hmm. They're both more light colored. So, although the body, I guess, is darkish.
Yeah, you have a dark body with kind of white or lighter wings that span out.
Yeah. I'm a little torn in terms of Harmony or Discord.
That's the game we're playing here.
Because on one hand, I think the figure is, glowing and white. So that would say like Harmony to me. But then the background is like kind of dark and ominous.
This is what I was
going
for.
And the person doesn't have a face. So that's also a little bit ominous.
Creepy. Also hard for the AIs to do. But we don't talk about that yet.
You just asked me to say what I thought.
I want your interpretation. This is beautiful.
So honestly, this is like, I feel a pretty good depiction of Harmony as he appears in the Lost Metal, which is like still divine, but with an edge where you're like, should I be scared of you?
Okay, that's a wonderful description and a perfect setup to our other images, because I feel like a lot of them are on the edge of, is this something I should like or something that I should be kind of afraid of?
Okay, where's the next one?
Here's the next one.
Oh.
We have a kind of thin humanoid individual in the center now with wings raised up high. And to me, this one has like more of a bird-esque vibe to the wings themselves, less like a falcon from the Avengers and more like a winged being or creature. But a lot of colors in this one. There's more oranges and blues for that contrast. And what are your first thoughts?
I think this one is maybe more harmony to me. This person looks like they're going to do some defending.
Ooh, I like it.
They look like a hero to me.
Like a harmony right after the Catasandra.
Maybe,
and the rebuilding of the world.
Powerful in a good way.
Okay.
For positive.
Love
Power
it.
for positive.
So harmony really like more than the other one.
Yeah.
This is
I
harmony.
think so, yeah.
Okay, number 3, harmony. Love it. Here's our next.
Oh, this is interesting.
Okay, so we have a more circular image and kind of like source of power and light where there is still a single individual in the center, but less like traditional wings here and more just like flowing power out from them.
Yeah. It's interesting because I read this humanoid figure as more female.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also noticing now that I look at it that this person has way too many fingers.
Never look at the fingers.
Funny.
Never look at the fingers. The fingers in AI, they don't like each other. It just doesn't know what fingers are.
It seems like such a basic thing that AI like should be able to understand.
It gets it wrong all the time.
It's just like 5. Like how hard is that to understand? 5 fingers.
It doesn't know. It's just very confused about what fingers are, like why they are needed. And so it's just like, you want hand-shaped things here.
Yeah.
Just finger-shaped things at the end of the arm.
This one is interesting. There is certainly that sense of power, like you were saying, sort of swirling around, but there is also a lot of darkness. So I think maybe more discord for this one. There's like the power lighting it up, but everything else around it is dark. So that makes me think this person is like using the power for darkness.
Okay, so you're going to call this one discord, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, discord. Nice. Here's our next one.
Oh.
We have another thin image, dark, and then wings going out, lighter, and then eventually white winged tips. There is similar, a lot of swirling power around the individual, kind of like gold and giving off a gold halo vibe. But I would say, without influencing you too much, this one kind of has some dark vibes to me.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this one. I certainly feel a sense of power, but I am not convinced if this person is using the power for bad. I'm undecided.
Undecided? Oh my gosh, we're running the full spectrum
This one is
here.
very interesting.
Okay, so actually my favorite thing about this one, why I included it in the first place, is because for some reason the AI gave this humanoid multiple arm positions, a la Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. Kind of his arms are down, looking more Sazed and reserved, but also arms outstretched.
I thought that was just part of its little robe dress thing.
Well, it could be that as well.
What I think is interesting about this one is the wings themselves have sort of a tree root
Ooh, I like
quality, or ripples and sand quality, or like stripes in a human iris.
The human iris is actually coming through quite strong now that you mention it.
Yeah.
That's a really good call.
So it's actually a very striking image, but I can't decide if it's harmony or discord.
Undecided.
This one is discord.
This one's discord. Okay,
Yeah.
Immediately. Okay, wow, I like that.
It is a dark individual with like glowing eyes. One wing is black, one wing is white light, and there is sort of darkness all around. I think it's probably the glowing eyes that's making me think like evilness.
Love it. I think that's an excellent description. And then I think we have one final one, and I might know where this one is going to go.
Okay. Well, this one is very clearly evil. Everything is dark, and the figure has like horns, a horn helmet type thing.
Yeah,
the wings are very skeletal.
It has like kind of a creepy bird vibe.
Very creepy.
You know,
it's not
when
even
like birds
trying to
are
be
dangerous.
harmony.
Exactly. And this one seems like almost like a full discord in my mind, where maybe some of the others
Yeah.
were transitions. This has tilted over into the edge.
For sure.
And that's our game. Is it Harmony or Discord? Thanks for
What
playing
do
along.
I win?
You win so many different things. The prizes are infinite. The glory is wonderful. But really what you win is the same thing that we all win, which are the friends we made along the way.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for playing along with us. All of the images will be down in the show links, and you can also join us over on Patreon or any of your social media feeds to play along when we have silly games and I get too obsessed with the artificial intelligence creations of Cosmere characters. Thank you so much for having this discordant but sometimes harmonious conversation with me.
Until next time, life before death,
Strength before weakness.
journey before destination.